Perfect, thank you. So I'm thrilled to be here today. Thank you so much, Miriam and the whole Rosham team for hosting me. My name is Lauren Xie, and a bit of background on me before we get started. So ever since I can remember, my life has been very geographically mobile. My parents were immigrants from China. I was born in Canada, grew up in California, subsequently have lived in Indonesia, Australia, the UK, and Europe. And I am now speaking to you from Montpellier, France, where I'm temporarily based. So my work background is sectorally and thematically diverse, and I enjoy collaboration that crosses conventional boundaries. While I have worked in many different kinds of roles, I currently most identify with being an entrepreneur, a sustainability innovator, and a systems thinker and researcher. So to say just a few more words about my story, I graduated from Harvard with a degree in environmental science and public policy back in 2013, which is a highly interdisciplinary degree that began my interest in seeing connections across different disciplines. And this piqued my curiosity in wanting to dive deeper into the complexity of environmental challenges, leading me to work in Indonesia until 2017, primarily focused around issues of deforestation, indigenous rights, and agricultural innovation. And I began to see how many social impact ventures, despite good intentions, were creating unintended consequences due to lack of systems thinking, due to lack of deep thinking in terms of strategy and implementation, and also oftentimes lack of alignment between program objectives, stakeholder needs, and funder expectations, just to name a few of the dysfunctions. And so I thought there must be a better way to engage in social impact that is more holistic, more rigorous, and ultimately resilient and systemic in the impacts that we create. So this led me to go back to school in Oxford, where I then got an environmental governance master's, which had a rigorous theoretical foundation and drew from many different social science and humanities disciplines. And this program was transformational for me and inspired me to co-found Lively Worlds, which is who I'm here to represent today. So I subsequently did an MBA as well at Oxford, which I oriented around developing Lively Worlds, and I have been leading it ever since. So what is Lively Worlds? Lively Worlds is a think and do tank that aims to empower a socially and ecologically regenerative future. We are activating a global network of spaces for diverse communities to bridge interdisciplinary academic theory with practice, for example, through labs, workshops, and knowledge sharing. And informed by the collective knowledge of our network, we bring holistic and rigorous approaches to help organizations and individuals thrive while positively impacting the world's most pressing challenges. And so this brings us to today's topic, which is building anti-fragile ventures for a regenerative future. There is no doubt that we are living in turbulent times and that we are undergoing waves of change that are here and will continue to emerge into the future. In particular, 2020 has laid bare the fragility of our economic and social systems. This year is not even over, and no one could have foreseen that this year would bring with it the COVID-19 pandemic, the wave of anti-racism protests and Black Lives Matter overtaking cities, not just in the US, but around the world, and some of the worst fires ravaging the west coast of the US and more. And so interrelated challenges such as climate change, economic, racial, and other social inequalities, technological disruption, and changing consumer and social trends that are demanding for business to be more responsible, as well as issues of trust and reputation, all pose real risks as well as opportunities for business. So what does this have to do with anti-fragile? Well, under conditions of rapid change and uncertainty, fragile organizations break. Resilient organizations are able to survive some of the changes, absorb some of the shocks. Anti-fragile organization goes further than resilient organizations in that volatility actually feeds them to get better and better and to thrive, riding the waves rather than trying to fight them. So there are three main cases that we argue for anti-fragility. The first is leading with purpose and enhancing reputation. So according to Larry Fink, the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, ultimately, purpose is the engine of long-term profitability. There is huge potential for businesses who are driven by something other than just profit, and this can pay off in the long term. Second is capturing new opportunities. For example, efficiencies due to cost savings from sustainability measures can lead to expense savings, which help companies perform on ROI analyses. An example is Unilever's eco-efficiency programs avoided more than $395 million in costs. Also, you can capitalize on changes in consumer preferences. And to give an example, 380 million jobs were created by the global business opportunities between food, cities, health, and well-being, and energy and materials. Also, inclusive teams that are more diverse and equitable are likely to be more highly effective and to innovate. So, for example, a survey done by Inclusion at Work Index in Australia showed that organizations with inclusive teams were 10 times more likely to be highly effective, 9 times more likely to innovate, and 4 times more likely to stay with their employer over the coming year. Finally, there's mitigating new risks, especially interconnected global risks, from damage to physical company assets, to supply chain risks and market volatility, to access to capital risks and beyond. But part of our work as businesses is to enhance the lives of our consumers, and to do so, it's essential that we pursue anti-fragility. But there is also a broader case, a societal case for anti-fragility, beyond just our ability to enhance the competitiveness of our business models. And this societal case for anti-fragility demands that we extend our understanding of who we are impacting and who we depend on and take into consideration in the reality that our organizations, our ventures, do not operate in isolation. And so amidst these waves of change, it is evident that our businesses are interlocked with the world around us. What we see in the midst of COVID-19 is the interdependence across geographies that enables us to reach beyond the borders of our locales, but also fosters a particular inescapable vulnerability when challenges arise, whether they be the global pandemic or an environmental catastrophe. And we and our respective businesses are interlocked in the sense that social inequality within our communities and beyond are impacting our capacity to operate, limitations in the provision of healthcare within our communities and beyond are inhibiting our capacity to prevent the harm of the pandemic. So ultimately, interdependence shows that these waves of change really expose the interlocked nature of our work, and really makes the case for why it's so important to build not only anti-fragile organizations, but to pursue this sort of resilience and regenerative mindset in the broader societal and ecological ecosystems that we operate in. So we have outlined 2 case studies in hopes to illustrate some of the ways in which anti-fragility can impact both the business space and broader society. In both of these cases, I will touch on instances in which organizations, companies experienced fragile crises, and this led to key oversights and failures. Notably, I want to emphasize that these were avoidable had these companies cultivated anti-fragility. So what is important is, as we review each case, is to build an understanding of the surface level concerns that might have been the focus of public attention and media, but also gain an appreciation for the systematic practices and cultures that fostered these cases of fragility. So the first case brings us to the BP oil spill of 2010. This was a heavily covered industrial disaster and one of the largest in US history. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill had catastrophic impacts on the Gulf of Mexico, and more specifically, the beaches, wetlands, and estuaries, and all of their inhabitants within the region. It killed 11 workers and spewed 130 million gallons of oil. Ultimately, the environmental harm caused was unprecedented and fostered an immense sense of distrust in BP, costing BP $18.7 billion in environmental fines, and to lose $40 billion in market value in the aftermath of the catastrophe. BP lost confidence among its stakeholders, who questioned whether the company had the capacity to be safe and ethical, and this was a result of systems failure, So rushed operations paired with faulty infrastructure paired with technical shortcuts on safety measures. One example of such corner cutting was that only 6 centralizers were used at the site for stabilizing of gas pipe versus the 21 typically required to lower safety risk. But beneath the surface of these evident failures are actually a series of decisions and cultures within BP at the time that were fostered over a much longer term. And these include an evident compromising of values within the company, which manifested in prioritizing cost cutting over safety measures. So for example, they use something called an asset federation model within the organization, where each site manager managed their asset autonomously and then was compensated for this asset's performance. And so there thus was very little incentive to share best practices on risk management among the various BP exploration sites. Moreover, just 5 years prior to the spill, BP had entered into a settlement with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which made it clear that BP knew even prior to the accident that its safety standards were not adequate, nor were its monitoring services. And to date, BP is still paying for this oil spill. We're now in 2020, 10 years later, and this is due to continuing lawsuits from the ongoing impacts of the tragedy, bringing direct fines and payouts now to $70 billion to date. So the second case I want to share with you today is from Paul Weiss, a corporate law firm. Paul Weiss was known as one of the US's most prominent and profitable law firms, and it faced widespread criticism in 2018 for lacking any diversity among their staff, and specifically amongst their partners. Alongside this public criticism about the lack of diversity, brought to the fore multiple cases of discrimination that had been experienced by members of the firms. So just to give one example, a lawyer of color was often the recipient of comments such as, "You don't look like a lawyer." So in response to this, the firm announced a new partnership class in December of 2018, specifically advertising the diversity that they had allegedly gained. This is a screenshot here of the firm's LinkedIn post announcing their new partner class, trying to make a point to undermine any criticism that they had regarding the selection of employees. But as you can see from this photo amongst the lineup, it appears that all the partners, of which there were 12, were white men, except for one white woman. And this prompted the New York Times to publish another piece titled, "Elite Law Firm's All-White Partner Class Stirs Debate on Diversity," which only added fuel to the fires of the criticisms the firm had previously faced, as it was apparent that however the firm had defined diversity when making selections for their newest partnership class was not appropriately addressing the concerns of critics. So what Paul Weiss struggled with at the root of this case was a misunderstanding of how diversity had to incorporate and value a myriad of experiences and identities of race, gender, religion, experiences, and many others. And in failing to do this, the firm struggled not only to recruit non-white male partners as a result of lawyers not seeing people who looked like them in the workspace, but it also struggled to retain the partners that felt like they had additional difficulties in the workplace when they felt like they were the only one having an additional burden being placed on them. And so in both of these cases, in both the BP and the Paul Weiss case, fragile aspects of each of these companies not only compromised their reputation and had significant financial consequences, but they also had a negative impact on social and environment, the social and environmental ecosystem for broader society. So thriving requires antifragility, but what does antifragility look like? We can think to a healthy forest ecosystem as a great metaphor for thinking about an antifragile system. It's a beautiful process of experimentation where no single entities that when put under stress to the point of collapse is a danger to destroying the whole system. So for example, you can have a disease that wipes out a particular species, but that doesn't destroy the entire forest. It adapts. Even after a fire, a forest can regenerate by itself. And crucially, there is no CEO in charge of managing the forest. The system sustains and flourishes on its own, getting better through evolution. So how can we bring these regenerative and anti-fragile qualities to our companies? Anti-fragile is a term that we borrowed from Nassim Taleb, who is a former Wall Street options trader and risk analyst, and now is a renowned scholar. And we're basically expanding and building upon the concept that he introduced. Taleb suggested in his work that it is absurd to neglect the unexpected in a world that is characterized by so many unexpected events, which he calls black swan events. And a quote from Taleb suggests that the problem with experts is that they do not know what they don't know. However, Taleb doesn't articulate how exactly to implement or to develop anti-fragile capability for an organization. So that is what we are doing at Lively Worlds. We've compiled a diverse range of academic literature taught out of universities such as Oxford and Harvard and others. Examples of the fields that we draw from include strategy and innovation, management, urban design, geography, economics, leadership studies, but also less well-known academic knowledge from fields such as post-colonial studies, feminist studies, critical race theory, science and technology studies, political ecology, and more. And these lesser-known disciplines offer deep insights for developing anti-fragile capabilities, which when fused together with the insights from the more mainstream academic disciplines I had previously mentioned, are incredibly powerful. And these, together with our network's diverse collective professional experiences, form the basis for our anti-fragile diagnostic tool that we've developed. So this diagnostic framework enables us to assess the anti-fragility potential of social ventures to identify gaps, and it guides us into building that anti-fragile capability for these ventures. So let's take a quick glance into some aspects of the framework, as we don't have time, unfortunately, to go into all of them today. But just to give you a taste, so our diagnostic framework has 4 main interlinked themes that are covered, and each has multiple layers of criteria and sub-criteria underneath. So the first one is organizational alignment, so looking at internal organizational alignment. Second is ecosystem alignment, so how aligned is your organization to the broader ecosystem in which it operates? Third is social and environmental viability, and fourth is economic viability. So profitability and other shorter-term indicators of business health. Next, we will very briefly zoom in to select aspects of each of these themes, except economic viability, which is wholly dependent on the performance of the other 3 axes. So we'll start with internal organizational alignment. Some of the areas that we diagnose within this theme include measurement of impacts, leadership, culture, communication, and organizational purpose. We'll just quickly zoom in on organizational purpose a bit deeper. So one aspect of this is shared understanding of an organization and its lived purpose within the employees and within the teams. So basically, why does your business exist? What is its reason for being? This is an important quality to antifragility. Next, we'll briefly zoom in to the ecosystem alignment aspect. Some of the areas that we diagnose within this theme include stakeholder engagement, innovation, resilient supply chains, and robust risk management. So to zoom in on risk management, one aspect is there crisis management strategy in place in the case of unanticipated crises or black swan events? And how robust is this crisis management process? Next, quickly zoom in to social and environmental viability. Some of the areas that we diagnose within this theme include integrated ethics considerations for financing, investment, and lobbying strategies, forward-looking systems for assessing the business implications for long-term social and ecological justice, environmental sustainability, empowered communities and workers. To what extent does the business combat the forces of societal inequality in terms of kind of more systemic structures, and then also sensitivity to diversity. So just to quickly zoom into the diversity piece. One aspect that we look at is to what extent is diversity celebrated within the organizational culture and integrated into decision-making processes. So that was just a very, very quick glance of a few tiny pieces of our diagnostic framework to give you a sense of the types of topics that we cover. But it's important to note that not all of the indicators in this framework are relevant to every business because it is intended to be holistic. However, many of them are, and everything in this framework works together in connected ways in order to enhance anti-fragile capability. Diversity enhances it, strong innovation enhances it, organizational alignment enhances it. And so together, this framework enables a more comprehensive assessment of antifragility, and in particular helps us to identify the fragile aspects of a business that may otherwise be easily overlooked. So we support impact investors, philanthropists, and the ventures they fund in two ways. One, during due diligence to assess the anti-fragile potential of potential investments or grants. And two, to cultivate anti-fragile capability through their work once they've invested in a portfolio or to work specifically with the ventures that have been funded. So this way, when the next Black Swan event hits, whether it be the next pandemic, the next devastating natural disaster, the next wave of social protests, these companies are equipped to navigate the uncertainty and change. Not only that, but these ventures will be in a better position to see and take advantage of positive, what we call green swan events. So basically Black Swan events, but in a positive way, to further thrive while helping to shift our economy from one that is broken to one that is regenerative. So we do workshops and coaching, but today I want to talk more about our learning journeys, our learning and doing journeys, which are by far the most impactful and necessary type of work that we do for building anti-fragile ventures. So we design bespoke digital learning and doing journeys for impact-driven ventures, depending on their specific needs and the investors and funders' specific areas of concern. And these journeys might start with a set of onboarding workshops on tailored topics to start when a new cohort of ventures are added to a portfolio. So a few examples might include team alignment in terms of onboarding workshop topics, team alignment and culture design, ensuring that the team works well together, developing an anti-fragile friendly culture, processes, and team dynamics. Might also include a primer on climate change and sustainability and the likely impacts and dependencies on their venture and their broader ecosystems. A primer on diversity, equity, and inclusion for building inclusive workplaces and stakeholder engagement practices, and or social and environmental impact paradigms and methodologies, covering the diversity of approaches that are out there for understanding, measuring, and managing impact. And these onboarding workshops would then be followed by light touch learning and doing cycles over an agreed extended time period, for example, 1 to 4 years. These would be comprised of facilitated digital workshops on a periodic basis, so for example, monthly, diving deep into specific aspects of antifragility and innovating on actions and strategies for moving forward. So innovation and solutioning are built into these learning sessions. The teams would then engage in direct application and testing their work over this extended period of time between the workshops. And this is inspired by sort of agile, lean startup informed methods and theory. So throughout the learning and doing journey, there will be regular built-in opportunities for deep reflection and triple loop learning through iterating between these knowledge deep dives from our sessions and then practicing and doing in real time with their teams amidst a rapidly changing and complex context. And between the workshops, we can also provide ongoing support, including individual and group coaching if desired. So our learning and doing journeys enable the teams to develop anti-fragile capability in the process of creating better ventures, and this results in deeper, wider, and more resilient impact in the face of rapid social and environmental change. So this was just an example of what a journey could look like, but of course we customize to our client needs. So just to give a couple more examples of potential topics that we offer deep dives in our learning journeys. We offer topics such as unpacking power and privilege, leadership and decision-making for wicked problems, history and systems thinking for regeneration, the ethics of institutions, and breaking down binaries for innovation. And what is unique about our approach is that we think of impact as an ongoing process and not an end state. So taking into account the complexity of the world and the fact that the world is always changing, impact is not achieved by imagining the world as it is right now, as static, while one implements activities, because that's not reality. And we must develop the capability to sense broader and to sense in systems, to sense flux, and to embrace change so that we can thrive within that context. So how we think about impact needs to evolve with the realities of a fast-changing and highly interconnected world. And Lively Worlds is especially equipped to do this because we are a think and do tank, self-described, which means that we engage in research at the intersection of interdisciplinary academic theory and the world of practice. We have a praxis lab, so praxis capturing this interplay between theory and practice. So we have a praxis lab in Oxford and have plans to extend this to a network of university praxis labs across different geographies, where we will always have fresh thinking at the cutting edge of these diverse academic disciplines to update our approaches and work. So if you found this talk so far interesting or are interested in supporting or possibly sponsoring our work, please feel free to connect with me after today's talk. For those of you who are impact investors, philanthropists, or otherwise support impact ventures, and you are interested in learning more about how you can apply anti-fragile capability to your work or to your portfolio, I would be more than happy to schedule a time to chat. My contact information is here. Also, we are offering a discount for our workshops, learning journeys, and coaching services as a thank you for those attending the summit if you contact me by the end of this week, so Friday, September 18th. My email address is below, lauren@livelyworlds.org. Our website is www.livelyworlds.org. You can also find me on LinkedIn if that's your preferred method of communication. And also, if you're interested in joining our movement for empowering a regenerative future by bridging academic theory and practice, you can do so very easily, just filling out a super quick form in 1 minute on our website, www.livelyworlds.org. And you'll receive a monthly newsletter with articles, updates, and opportunities. So I will end with a quote by the revered and extremely wise Albert Einstein, which is, "We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them." And I'd argue that anti-fragile thinking and regenerative thinking are the next generation levels of thinking that we need to develop in ourselves, in our teams, and in the world. So thank you very much, and let's build back better.